Right now, somewhere near your back door, there's a squirrel sitting up on its hind legs, watching the window, waiting to see if you're the one who's about to walk outside. That squirrel knows your face. It knows your walk. It might even know the specific sound your screen door makes before you do. And today we're going to find out just how far that recognition actually goes, because the answer is stranger and more touching than most people expect. Welcome back to NutriPause. Two things are coming up that most backyard feeders get completely wrong. And one of them is sign number 5, which explains why your squirrel sometimes seems to vanish for days right after you build a routine together, and it isn't because it forgot you. The other is sign number 7, a feeding habit that feels generous but is quietly working against the bond you think you're building. Sign 1 is the freeze and stare. You step outside, and instead of bolting for the tree the second it sees movement, the squirrel stops, sits up tall, and just looks at you for a beat longer than it would look at a stranger. That pause is not an accident. Researchers who study scatter hoarding rodents, including work associated with animal cognition specialist Lucia Jacobs, whose research has focused heavily on how squirrels build spatial and social memory, have long pointed out that squirrels rely on an enormous mental map, not just of where they've buried food, but of which moving figures in their territory are threats and which are neutral or even beneficial. A squirrel that freezes and studies you rather than fleeing immediately is running a quick internal check, cross-referencing your shape, your gait, and your scent against a memory bank it has been building every single time you've walked past. Try this tomorrow. Step outside at the same time you normally would, but wear something different, a bright jacket or a hat you never wear, and watch how much longer the freeze and stare last before the squirrel relaxes. That extra hesitation is the moment you're literally watching recognition try to catch up to a visual mismatch. It's a strange kind of privilege being paused for. Sign 2 is what rehabbers sometimes call the follow without approach. The squirrel won't come straight to you, especially if it's still wary, but it will move along the fence line or across a branch, tracking your position as you walk the yard, staying roughly parallel the entire time. The National Wildlife Rehabilitators Association has noted in public education materials that squirrels, unlike a lot of small mammals, show strong sight fidelity and will often shadow a known food source, human or otherwise, at a safe distance while they decide whether to commit to an approach. That parallel tracking is not random wandering. It's deliberate positioning, keeping you in sight while keeping an escape route open. Try this yourself tomorrow. Instead of walking straight toward the feeding spot, walk a slow loop around the yard and see if the squirrel repositions itself to keep you in view the whole time. If it does, you're not looking at a nervous animal ignoring you. You're looking at an animal actively monitoring someone it has already filed away as familiar. There's something almost moving about being tracked, that carefully by something so small and so easily able to disappear. Sign 3 is the tail flick that is an alarm. A lot of people assume every tail flick means the squirrel is stressed or warning off a predator, but wildlife veterinarians who study Sciurus carolinensis, the eastern gray squirrel most common in backyard across the country, have described a specific slower, looser flick that shows up specifically around familiar humans and is more closely tied to what's often described as an excited or anticipatory state rather than a fear state. The difference is subtle. A sharp, rigid flick paired with barking usually means alarm, while a looser, rolling flick with the body relaxed and the ears forward often shows up right as the squirrel notices you've come outside with food in hand. Try this tomorrow. Watch the tail the moment the squirrel first spots you, before it sees whether you're carrying anything. If the flick is loose and the posture stays relaxed, that recognition already happened before food ever entered the equation, which means the excitement is about you showing up, not just about what you're holding. That's the kind of detail that quietly rewires how you think about the animal in your yard. Sign 4 is route memory. If you always fill the same dish or scatter food along the same section of fence, notice how the squirrel arrives already heading straight for that spot, sometimes before you've even set anything down. State wildlife agencies that publish backyard wildlife guidelines, including several departments of fish and wildlife, have pointed out that squirrels build detailed mental maps, not just of buried food caches, but of reliable, repeated human behavior. And they will adjust their daily movement patterns around a consistent feeding location the same way they'd adjust around a reliable natural food source like an oak that drops acorns every autumn. In other words, you become a landmark. Try this yourself tomorrow. Move the food to a completely different spot in the yard, 6 or 8 feet away, and time how long it takes the squirrel to find it versus how long it usually takes to reach the old spot. That delay is the map being redrawn in real time, and it's a small, humbling reminder that you occupy actual real estate in that animal's memory. Here's where it gets more interesting, because signs 5 and 6 are the two that most people watching this get completely backwards, and understanding them changes how you'll read every disappearance and every reappearance from here on out. Sign 5 is the disappearing act that isn't abandonment. You build a routine, the squirrel shows up daily for weeks, and then suddenly it's gone for 4 or 5 days straight, and it's easy to assume it forgot you, moved on, or worse. But wildlife rehabilitators consistently point out that squirrels shift their foraging priorities seasonally, and sometimes week to week, chasing natural food sources like ripening seeds, budding trees, or a sudden mass crop from a nearby oak, because instinct pushes them toward variety and abundance, even when a reliable backyard source exists. The Humane Society has published guidance reminding backyard feeders that supplemental feeding is meant to be exactly that, supplemental, and a squirrel's absence during a natural food surge is a sign of a healthy, functioning wild animal, not a sign the relationship has broken. Try this yourself tomorrow. Keep the food fresh and available anyway, even on day 3 or 4 of silence, and track how quickly the squirrel resumes its old route the moment the natural source dries up. Most of the time, it comes back exactly where it left off, sometimes within a single day. That continuity after days of nothing is one of the more quietly emotional things you can witness in a backyard. Sign 6 is the mistake almost everyone makes without realizing it, and it's overfeeding out of guilt during that exact disappearance window. When the squirrel vanishes for a few days, people panic a little and start leaving out double portions or richer foods like peanuts and sunflower seeds in bulk to lure it back faster. Wildlife nutrition guidance from rehabilitation organizations is fairly consistent on this point, that a diet overloaded with peanuts and sunflower seeds, both of which are high in fat and phosphorus relative to calcium, can contribute over time to metabolic bone disease in squirrels, a condition where calcium is pulled from the skeleton to balance the diet, leading to weakened bones and, in advanced cases, fractures or paralysis. It's one of the most common and most preventable health issues seen in backyard-fed squirrels. Try this yourself tomorrow. Check what you're actually offering and swap at least half of any peanut or sunflower seed portion for something calcium forward, like a small piece of dried corn on the cob, a few pieces of squash, or a commercial rodent block designed with proper calcium ratios. The squirrel doesn't need more food to remember you. It needs better food to stay healthy enough to keep coming back. Sign 7 is the cheek pouch pause. Watch closely the next time the squirrel takes food from the dish. If it's a squirrel that trusts the space, it won't just grab and sprint. It'll often pause for a second or two right there, stuffing food into its cheek pouches while still in your line of sight, rather than immediately bolting to bury or eat it elsewhere. Animal behaviorists who study caching species note that this kind of exposed, unhurried pouching behavior typically only happens in territory the animal considers low risk, meaning the presence of a familiar human hasn't raised its guard the way a stranger or a predator would. Try this yourself tomorrow. Stand still, arms relaxed, roughly 6 to 8 feet away while it feeds, and count how many seconds it stays before moving off. Compare that to how it behaves if a stranger, a dog, or an unfamiliar noise enters the yard at the same distance. The contrast tells you everything about where you actually rank in that animal's sense of safety. Sign 8 is the one that matters most, and it's less a behavior to spot and more a feeling to sit with. After weeks or months of this, of the freeze and stare, the parallel tracking, the loose tail flick, the route memory, the disappearances and returns, something shifts in how you watch your own yard. You start noticing the exact branch it uses to descend the oak. You start recognizing its particular scruff of fur near one ear, or the way it favors one side when it runs. And somewhere in there, without ever deciding to, you've taken on a small, quiet responsibility for a wild animal that has decided, in its own limited and instinct-driven way, that you're not a threat, and maybe more than that you're a landmark of safety in a world that is otherwise mostly danger and scarcity for something that size. That's not sentimentality. Wildlife veterinarians who work with rehabilitated squirrels will tell you plainly that consistency of a safe, appropriately balanced food source measurably reduces stress hormones and improves body condition in urban and suburban squirrel populations compared to animals relying entirely on unpredictable natural forage in fragmented habitat. So when people ask whether a squirrel can miss you, the honest scientific answer is that squirrels don't experience longing the way humans narrate it to themselves, but they do build reliable associative memory around safety, food, and familiar movement patterns. And you, standing at your back door every day at roughly the same time, have become part of that memory in a way that measurably changes how calm, how healthy, and how likely to thrive that particular squirrel actually is. Taking that seriously, feeding it well instead of just feeding it often, is what proper care for a backyard squirrel actually looks like. So here's what I want to know from you. Drop a comment and tell me the one behavior your backyard squirrel does that made you realize it actually recognizes you. Whether that's a specific sound it makes, a spot it waits at, or something it does the second it sees you step outside. And if you got a photo of your regular yard visitor, post it because I want to see who we're all taking care of out there. If this helped you see your own backyard a little differently, share it with someone else who feeds the squirrels in their yard, because most of them have no idea how much they've already been noticed. Thanks for watching. This has been NutriPause.